Cool. So here is Tallis Jordan's workshop intro video. It's about 18 minutes over here. We're going to play this. I'm going to kind of zoom in as much as I can. His workshop is on rolling your own threat intelligence analyst. Very exciting. And then we're going to bring Tallis on right after that and let him talk more about what he's got prepared for us. So let me do that right now.
Hey everybody, I'm Rain from Hard Counter. If you aren't familiar with me, you can check me out on my LinkedIn. Over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to get an overview on what it looks like and takes to build a working analyst that runs entirely on your system. No API, no cloud, nothing leaving your machine. It just reads the Firehost that is open source intelligence for you, scores it for usefulness, extracts the IOCs, and serves it up on a nice plate. By the end, you'll have a real modifiable app you can use for, well, whatever you want. Sports, make it do sports. World news, make it do world news. It's up to you. So this project was originally born out of a frustration I had. For the last few years, I've read intelligence morning and afternoon, sometimes at night, and all that time adds up to a very depressing number. If you work in cyber and try to keep up with everything, you already know that pain. Bleeping Computer, the Hacker News, vendor blogs, CISA, newsletters, random researchers. You're talking probably hundreds of articles a day across all of these different sources. The worst part is that maybe 10% of it contains anything you actually do something with. A real technique called out, a registry key, a command line, whatever the case. The rest is webinar notifications, product launches, breach disclosures, and everything else with zero technical detail. So you spend an hour of your day skimming, maybe more. That doesn't scale, obviously. The problem isn't access to the intelligence. It's being able to digest it at all. So that being said, what if a machine could read it all for you, score it to your criteria, and only showed you things worth your time? That's what we're doing. This entire application is essentially 6 jobs. It pulls the latest articles from RSS feeds you specify, extracts the article body text, triages every article with a local model and gives it a score, extracts IOCs, defangs those IOCs, and lastly, presents it all on a clean, streamlit dashboard so you can filter and search through them to your will. There's no magic. That's the whole thing. You're probably asking, why not just use an API? There's a couple reasons we decided to use local models for this. The first big one is privacy. I care a lot about privacy. Some of you might too. This pipeline can be modified to ingest offline intelligence as well, which could be sensitive in nature. If you use a local model, that data doesn't go anywhere unless you choose to. The second one is cost. There's no per token billing. You could run the pipeline against 1,000 articles a day and it costs you nothing except your electricity. The next big one is that you can move it. Once your model is pulled down, you don't actually need internet. As long as you're ingesting your intelligence offline, you could isolate this as much as you want. And lastly, it's yours to modify. Everything is in Python. You can swap the model, you can rewrite the system prompt, add new IOC types. This is the starting point of an application you own, not something you rent. So this is your mental model for the pipeline. It's 5 files. That's it. It starts with a feeds file, which is where you'll store your RSS feed URLs, okay? After that, Fetch reads those feeds using feed parser. Then for each article, it uses, and I'm gonna butcher this, Trafilatura. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it, but from now on, I will refer to that as Traf, to download the page and pull out the article body text. Then Analyze takes that text, hands it to a local model via Ollama, and the model returns a summary, a score, and IOCs. The database script is our storage layer. We're using plain old SQLite. You might hate me for saying it like that, but it's what I've chosen. With write-ahead logging enabled, which I'll explain later. And finally, the app script, which is just a streamlit dashboard that reads from the database and gives you the UI layer and functionality. Tying all of that together is the pipeline script. It calls the fetch script, it loops over the articles, it calls for analysis on each one, and saves the results with one simple script. Now, let's walk through in a bit more depth. A quick tour of the toolbox, so to speak. The theme here is, if you can't tell, small and boring. And that's not a bad thing. Boring tools don't surprise you when you're using them. Python 3.12 is the backbone. Feed parser handles your RSS feeds. Traf extracts the article text, hopefully with no ads most of the time, but this is your grunt worker. Ollama runs your local model. SQLite is our database, just a file on a disk, and Streamlit to get a nice UI with next to no front-end coding requirements. Oh, and if you want, there's Docker files included. What's it look like to get this running? It's 5 steps, and the longest part is waiting for the model to download. So install Python 3.12 or newer, and Olama. I suggest just downloading the desktop application. Try some local models out in the chat if you have the hardware on the side. Step 2 is pulling a model. I use Gemma 4 E4B specifically for the workshop course content and anything you'll see in this overview, though most of you should likely start with something like Quinn 3.5 4B like we have off to the side here. 3, change the model name in Analyze Pi, which is on line 8 if you aren't using the same model I used, which you likely won't be, or you might be, who knows. After that, you run pipeline.py. It runs the entire pipeline. And then you use Streamlit to launch the dashboard, and you just go to the URL. Quick fact, it'll usually say localhost 8501. In my experience, that results in a black screen, so just use the loopback address. It usually works. But that's the entire user experience. So Fetch's whole job is to turn a list of your feed URLs into clean article text a model can read. It runs through your text file, then feed parser parses each feed and gives us the entries. It's hard-coded in to pull the last 24 hours. You are free to change this after the first few runs. I just don't want it to explode the first time you run it. Some feeds, however, won't include timestamps, and the script will decide to pull them anyway. I will caution you, you should check your feeds before you do this, because it could result in a lot of articles being pulled. The more important part here is the body extraction. The feed only gives us a link and a title, not the full article. So for each link, we use trap. The page is downloaded and then the body is extracted. We cap this at 8,000 characters so we don't blow up the model's context window, and that's something we discuss more in the course content itself. So the analyze script is pretty much the heart of the whole thing. This is where the article meets the model. See the format equals JSON? This essentially tells Olama to constrain the model so it returns a valid JSON object and not a paragraph that you typically get with a chat interface like ChatGPT. We ask for a few fields, and this is how we get our structured data. It's worth mentioning, though, that just because the response will be in JSON, it does not mean that the model is not going to invent additional fields or something else in that output. The next big thing is temperature. Temperature controls what is essentially variance. At 0, the model is pretty deterministic, meaning you'll likely get the same score and same summary every time you run it over the same article. And you can test this out. When you go through the workshop, you'll see you can run these scripts individually to test these over and over again. For our purposes, though, it is a requirement to set the temperature to 0. You don't want an article to score 90 one day, 40 the next. You can't trust that. 0 temperature is what makes this stable. You're free to play around with it, though, by all means. And most importantly, the system prompt. So with this script, you'll send a system prompt and a user prompt. The user prompt is just the article information. The system prompt is where you give the model its job and criteria. You'll spend most of your time tweaking this. If you take one thing from this into your projects, the quality of your system prompt is pretty much the quality of your analyst. If you tell a model to rate an article from 1 to 100, you'll get garbage. The model has no idea what you specifically mean by relevant. So it defaults to vague guesses and you get random scores in return. But if you give it a rubric, kind of like how someone grades a paper, ground it. The system prompt itself is used to assign a role. So for example, you could say you are a detection engineer triaging threat intelligence. That one sentence sets the entire task for the model. So you want to be specific. Then you want to give it a rubric and tell it to default to lower scores when it's unsure. The important thing is that the rubric describes your definition of valuable. A threat hunter would write different criteria, so would a SOC manager. The first thing you should do when you tweak this is rewrite it for your role. You aren't tuning or training a model, you're writing what you care about in plain English, and it doesn't get easier than that. What's on the slide is just an example. You can feel free to check it out later, but don't read too deep into it. But definitely keep webinars down at 0 to 9. We also ask the model to extract IOCs. By default, there's a few types we set, but as we've discussed, the models can hallucinate. Sometimes it's something completely made up, like it's not in the article text at all. So, like we said, you can't trust the model blindly. That being said, we run a couple checks. The first is just a simple allow list of IOC types. If it returns something not in that list, it gets dropped. The second one is obvious. If it returns an IOC, we check to make sure it even appears in the original article text. If not, we throw it away. This alone will get rid of quite a few hallucinations. Lastly, we filter our junk values, stuff like NA, none, unknown, Models love to use these things when they don't have an answer for you, and then dedupe the actual values that we do end up with. Everything that survives those guards gets defanged for display in the dashboard itself. We're using plain old SQLite, just a file called IntelDB sitting in the project folder. We use 3 different tables, and that's just to split up each phase of the output essentially. One to hold the article information, one to hold the analysis, and one to hold the IOCs, so all linked by the article ID. The biggest thing to remember here is that we use write-ahead logging, and this will put a few additional files on the disk. But we do this because if you don't, SQLite will lock up the database during a write. So if you're running Streamlit, you decide to throw the pipeline on, and you try to go look through the articles on the dashboard, it's likely going to be locked up. Write-ahead logging prevents that from happening. Last, but definitely not least, we have the Streamlit dashboard. Streamlit is great because you basically bypass all need for front-end code, but you still get a clean, modifiable UI. There's a couple things pre-baked into the script, a score slider and a search feature. Slide the score slider up to 80, now you have nothing but good actionable intel. Need to search, it goes over the title, body, summary, and IOCs, both the feigned and defanged versions. So let's see it run. So if we come over here, I'm already in the virtual environment, whether you're setting this up in Docker or whatever the case may be. All I'm going to do here is Python pipeline.py. Give it a second. This is room for improvement on this script when you start modifying yourself, giving it progress bars. That's probably the biggest one. But as you can see, it's going to start processing through these articles with a local model that I have on my system. So while this is doing its thing, I will go ahead and pull up the Streamlit dashboard so you can take a look at what that is. You can see here, this is some older analysis just to show you that it does do some low scores and it doesn't rate everything high because it's a little seated at the moment. You can see here, your automated pen test looks clean from the Hacker News. It scored it at a 10. One thing you can also do with this that wasn't included in the script is you can make it give reasoning forward scoring. That way you can see that on here and see why I rated something low. It helps a lot with tuning when you're doing your system prompts and making your rubric and everything like that. This is essentially what it's going to look like. You can click here, you can see the article body. And then if this isn't enough, you're not pulling inline screenshots. So that's something to take note of, right? A lot of these articles might have inline screenshots. If you don't see them, you just click into the article and you can check it out. But for the most part, the summary, the IOCs, and the body text here is usually more than enough to get you going. A huge improvement you can make later on in this, and this is not something we get through in the content, but you can start formulating detection ideas. If you have more hardware, so if you're running a 4090, a 5090, something along those lines, right? You can run bigger models to get better output. Detection creation is not going to be perfect on models of that size. You really need something in the cloud. That is something you could use Olama to do. You could push it to a cloud model to do detection ideas. And that could be something you have your smaller model come up with the idea. That information is sent to a cloud model, and then it creates detection content for you. You slap that in your SQLite database, and you present it here in the Streamlit dashboard. But I digress. So if we go back to the terminal here, you can see it's getting through right now. So here's an article right here, Cybersecurity Stars Awards 2026. It scored it at a 10. That's great. Because if we come back over to Streamlit and we increase this minimum score, we're not going to see it, which is awesome. You will probably notice, though, that some of these do get scored relatively high. I would put that on the model mostly, but it could be the prompt itself. I have to go check out the articles myself, but this is something for you to play with. This is not a finished product by any means. We can also check out the code real quick, and this can give you an idea, taking a quick look at this, what a system prompt is actually going to end up looking like. But you can get way crazier than this. This is just a placeholder for sure. Feel free to get crazy with it. And this is the part where I hand off the keys to you. What we built is a starting point on purpose. We aren't giving you a finished project. Here's some ideas you can have, though. Your feeds. We've already hit on this, but the feeds list is for sources you care about. The next one is your prompt. This is arguably the most important, and the default prompt has a specific definition of useful. It won't fit everyone's requirements. Rewrite it for your job. A threat hunter cares about different things than a SOC analyst, who also cares about different things than an IR lead. The next one is your model. Swap the models. Bigger models will typically score more accurately and write better summaries, and you can also generate detections, as I mentioned previously, but at the cost of speed and hardware requirements. A smaller one will rip through articles. Try a few and see what the quality versus speed trade-off feels like. Do whatever your hardware can handle. Another one is add IOCs. you can really add whatever you want. Emails, register keys, mutexes, go to town. And there's a lot more ideas at the end of the workshop course content as well. Some things that I do in my personal pipeline that I use. There's so many options. You can make this thing do anything. You could take out all the cyber stuff from this and turn it into a sports feed if that's really what you want to do. I would be doing you wrong, though, if I see you off thinking this was all magic. So let's be honest about a couple limitations. Verify before you act. IOCs come from a model. We guard against some hallucination, but you should treat them as leads, essentially, not as truth. Before you push any IOC into a block list or an alert, confirm it against an authoritative source. Do not take the model's word for it. The model can also miss things. The guard stops it from inventing IOCs that aren't there, but it can't force the model to catch every one of them. Same with scores. They're great guidance for triage, but they're not perfect. A 40, for example, isn't a guarantee something is worthless. Use a score to prioritize. Don't completely ignore them. This is code meant for a workshop. It's written to be read and modified to your liking in one sitting. Hopefully, maybe more, whatever you decide to do. But it's clear, it's small, but it is not ready for a production environment. Some people will try to use this in a production environment to handle intelligence that's sensitive in nature and is completely offline. This is not ready for that. You have a lot of work to do if that's where you want to get it. You also own the tuning. The scores you get on day one reflect a specific rubric and a specific model. That's a starting point. Expect to spend some time modifying the prompt, playing with some models before the output is where you like it. To be clear, these aren't reasons not to use this. They're just things you need to know. As we put a bow on this workshop overview, though, let's talk about what you're getting. So you're getting a working local Intel analyst. 5 small files. The pipeline goes fetch, analyze, store, display. And the whole thing runs on your own hardware with no cloud. It's a tool, not a toy. A reusable pattern for getting reliable output of a model. You can apply the same principles from this project to just about anything you slap AI into or any other AI projects you work on. Some simple safeties like the hallucination guard, the defanging and read-only database calls are great. You can use those concepts again across many other projects. But the most important thing probably is a platform you can understand. This is not a black box. Every line is in plain Python. Anyone can take this, read it, have AI explain it to them. It doesn't matter. That means that it's that much easier to extend, fix, and bend to your will. That's the workshop. And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to me yap a bit, and thanks for ContinuumCon for letting HardCounter present this. Every piece of code in this workshop is dove into in more depth in the actual workshop course content. I highly encourage you to build the application from there so you fully understand what's going on. But a copy of it is also available on GitHub. The link is here on the slide. Clone it, pull a model, run the pipeline, and you'll have your own analyst running in about 10 minutes. But yeah, do the course material, learn the pipeline, and above all, make it yours. If you build something cool, be sure to tag myself and HardCounter. We do want to see it. Thanks again, and I hope you've had a great con up to this point. Now go automate your boring morning routine away. Have a good one.
Nice. I felt like I was in a mission briefing, didn't you, John? Like
that was awesome.
Locking in. That was really good. Yeah. Very cool. Well, Rain, Tallis, Jordan. So we got him in the backstage. We're going to bring him on stage. That was a really, really good presentation right there. I want to hear more what he has to say. So let's bring him on. You good to go? Little thumbs up. Cool. Rain, how you doing, man?
How's it going?
Going well. Thanks for coming on.
No, no worries. I don't do these very often. So,
dude, that was so cool.
Yeah.
I love the concept. I love the idea. I love, hey, the love for some local models. I know everyone in chat was very, very happy to see that. And I think there's a whole lot of fun stuff to talk about if you're willing.
Yeah, for sure. Let's get into it.
Awesome. Well, we're going to give you some space. We're going to hop off and let you have the stage over here and talk more about the workshop, describe more about it. And I know questions are starting to pile up. So how does that sound?
Yeah, for sure. We can probably start with questions, and then towards the end, last couple minutes, I can mention a couple more things.
Yeah, would you like us with you? Should we help source some questions and keep this going for a little bit, or did you want to be on your own? What are you feeling? It's all your show, my friend.
You guys can stay.
Cool. Roger that. I did pull up the workshop itself just because I thought, man, that's the coolest thing about letting everybody join in and getting a chance to dive in and set this up, getting some of the files, getting some of the code, spinning up the containers. So wanted to make sure we definitely showed that to everybody of like, look, you could do this.
Yeah, I think the best part about this workshop, and I call it out in the course content, is that you read every line of code throughout this workshop. So there's nothing in here that's like a secret sauce or a just trust me kind of thing. You're going to know exactly what every piece of code is doing in it, exactly where you can change, you can't change things. And you can run it however you want. If you want to run it in a virtual environment, like on your local system, if you want to use Docker, so you can spin it up on a server, whatever you want to do. It's really extendable. So many different things you can do. And this is spawned from a much more mature version of this project that I use for myself for my daily work. So I didn't want to give everyone the answers because then it's just like, well, let me git clone it and turn it on. But there's an important part to learning how to do these things yourself, especially when it's so easy with things like Streamlit to build the UI and everything.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you went for Streamlit because I think that's just the perfect way to do this. And that, like, hey, you immediately have a beautiful front end, a beautiful interface, and like you don't need to spend too much time getting wrapped around the axle and like building just that presentation layer. Like the engine here, the framework itself is the most important part. I just want it to be pretty and I want it shown right away. So Streamlit is such a perfect option, in my opinion.
100%. I think there's a couple of questions.
Yeah, let's start diving into them. Kind of scroll right back up. They were kind of rolling in before. Seeing a hell yeah for local models. Absolutely. Yes. Just joined us. Nope. Seeing different language, so not sure about that one. For step by nope, that's not that one either.
If I may, just shooting from the
Go
hip,
ahead.
and I forgive me, but is there more choices to be made on the local models perspective? I guess first and foremost is like, hey, do you use a bigger model? Do you use a smaller model? What sort of hardware do you need? How do you actually build this into your environment here?
Yeah, so my version of this, I actually have an experimental dashboard, right? So I got two different dashboards running. So the experimental one, excuse me, what I've been doing is multi-model. And I talk about this momentarily in the course content, but basically running an entire pipeline where you're talking to multiple models, right? And breaking up the jobs into what each model is good for, right? So small models like the Quinn 3.54B, very small. It's very capable, but you could be better off passing it to a larger model. And for a lot of people that are running 4090s, 5090s, a lot of the times you're probably going to be talking, like you're going to cap out around a 27B model, which is pretty big, pretty capable. And we won't dive into specifics of how like quants of these big cloud models work, right? But 27B models are better at analysis, but you really have to make the decision where your hardware is, how much load you want to put on it consistently, right? Because how often are you running this, right? Mm-hmm. If you're wanting it to be very consistent and you have like a 30 or hour delay on ingesting Intel, it might be running all the time, right? And that's hardware lockup you have for your resources, especially if you game or something, which I do. So a lot of mine has been momentarily moved over to the cloud until I get a server going here at the house. But I think the small models, especially while you're iterating over a system prompt and everything, are perfectly fine for this use case. The summaries are not long. There's other things you can do. One thing I do is clustering, right? So I got tired of seeing, 8 different places all talking about the same thing to differing levels, but it's the same exact subject, right? They might just mention a thing or two differently. So I'm using an embedding model that's very small. Pretty much anyone could run this and do it. But it essentially groups them together to form a single article card for the presentation layer. And then I use a bigger model and I feed all of the article body text from each article together in that group. It performs a big analysis and will even like do quotations for what came from each article. And you click into that and it gives you the cluster summary is what I call it. And then you read the whole overview. And there's a lot of ways you can break into that too. I also have daily overviews that will basically go through each story. So let's say I had 4 stories in a cluster and the next day another article came out, but it had a bunch more information that researchers found or whatever on the subject. So in my daily overview, it'll pop that up and say escalation with a link to the article because now there's updated information. or there might be stuff that's rescinded, et cetera, et cetera. But model-wise, yeah, I keep it small to begin until you get everything kind of fine-tuned where you want it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, I think we got one of the questions up here for you to answer over here, Ryan. So where do you see this going? Could we use it for even more use cases in security?
I think you can use local models for pretty much anything, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think the biggest concern people have with integrating AI is, well, where's our data going, right? And customers will always have that, especially if you work at a company with clients. And this is kind of something we're looking at doing at HardCounter, right? Is specializing in private AI systems for small businesses that are more like electrical companies and stuff like that, right? Where they do need the privacy and they have contracts and everything that can be sent into cloud models, excuse me. And then workflows, right? I think that's the biggest thing. And this workshop is a perfect example of that. So this is something you do every day, or should be doing every day, in my opinion, right? And if you can automate that away, it's never been easier.
Mm-hmm.
So you could use this for anything you can automate, essentially. The detection generation is something I've been playing with a lot. It really, once you get it going, right now at the current state of things, unless you have a nice RAG setup or you tune a model yourself, you're probably going to have to outsource that to cloud models, which you can do through Olama. It's a lot more private than ChatGPT. Yeah. But once you get that going, right, you analyze an article, it already presents detection for you, and you can write a style guide for it. So it writes a query like you would write, right? And all the enhancements that you normally put in. Or, at my company, maybe they do this specific context put into a query for the alert itself. It can go ahead and do that. And it just puts you a leg above. So when new stuff comes out in the first 5 to 10 minutes, you already have a query ready for it, whether you're a threat hunter, detection engineer, SOC analyst, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Kind of a follow-up question. So this is from my end over here, because you kind of mentioned it. What have you noticed that it does really well? Where have you noticed some of the gaps where it just really kind of buckles?
Detection generation is the biggest one. I tried for so long to get it to work with smaller models. But the runtime on it also gets crazy. One thing I don't talk about much, in fact, I explicitly say we won't get into it in the course content, is the difference between reasoning models and instruct models and thinking modes and all that kind of stuff. So when you take a reasoning model and you leave thinking on, it can take a long time to process an article, especially if you're using like a 27B model, and it can get kind of caught in the weeds, especially when it comes to log source types. A lot of times it'll invent fields or syntax that just does not exist. It's kind of crazy. And you can augment that for sure. So there's other options here. Like people have heard of OpenClaw. That's a big one. Hermes, I think people are starting to become more aware of. You could even use Open Web UI, which I don't think a ton of people are familiar with that one, but it's big. And it gives these local models access to tools, right, that they otherwise wouldn't have. And the big one, Open Web UI would be super easy to put in this project. It lets your local models be able to browse the internet, right? So then maybe you tell like a 27B model, you give it access to the internet through Open Web UI, and then it can query like syntax for these different query languages, or you build a small RAG knowledge base for it. Or it'll be able to look up additional intel on the subject, whatever the case may be, like ultimate Windows security to go see what a 4688 event looks like in reality, so it knows what fields are available.
Yeah, interesting. Quite a little bit of assembly required still, so it's not like as plug and play, right? And I think your workshop is going to be instructing students to be able to do that and build that for themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you have this one working right now as like something that, hey, I press the button for and it works and it runs and it spins and it does its thing with like your manual trigger? Or have you been able to like set this in motion and it's just running all the time, always on, autonomous loop sort of thing?
Yeah, so when I was first iterating on my version of the project, it was a lot of manual starting and stopping. And then I moved it to scheduled tasks just to see how it would work out. And it's graduated to where it's running on a VPS now. There's a Discord bot that posted in my private Discord, like when new intel comes in and everything. So you can get pretty crazy with it. You can do notifications too, right? And so you can have it kick off an email or shoot you a message on whatever, especially if you use something like Hermes. Your orchestration agents can be kicked off to like let you know there's new intel, all kinds of stuff. Or you could even use Hermes to kick off the whole pipeline yourself on a schedule if you want. Keep track of it all.
Yeah, I have been playing, just poking around with, hey, what we could do. I like to use Codex. I haven't gotten myself into the local models quite yet, but I know everybody's really trying to dive into it, especially, of course, yeah, with the current conversations in the world. But it's funny when I hear people talking about, hey, AI, LLMs, like, oh, it's a bubble, blah, blah, and whatever perspective they kind of might have. But I have to like acknowledge this technology, the innovation that's coming with it, and like what everyone can do, what you can build, what we can make is incredible and super powered streamlined stuff. But it's not that that's ever really going to go away. If AI is in a bubble, air quote, however you perceive that, it's not that LLMs just disappear. So absolutely 1,000% advocate and really encourage folks to dive into this, because this roll your own analyst setup is incredible. But imagine, I know the question was, what else could we do this for security? What about, hey, managed deception, cyber deception? What about more security research, finding vulnerabilities, finding bugs? Like, this is too cool. And thank you for helping start the scaffolding of like, look, you got a balance of deterministic code. Here's Python, here's Docker, here's SQLite, but then the non-deterministic AI wibbly wobbly stuff. I don't think I had a question in there. I'm sorry. I was just nerding out because it's too cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think local models a couple of years ago were not where they are now, right? So the capabilities were a lot less, but they are leaps and bounds catching up as fast as they can to a frontier model, right? They will probably won't ever be there, at least not now, anytime soon, but they might one day. And the other thing too is, you know, a lot of people use ChatGPT and Claude, and maybe those are the two most people have only heard of because that's all you see, the frontier models, right? But a lot of people will ask like Google type questions, which Google's already running AI on your searches, right? So now you're feeding that extra bit of potentially sensitive information depending on what you're asking, right? A lot of people ask medical questions, use it like therapy, stuff like that, right? So if you spin up local models with Ollama, you throw like Open Web UI on it, and where it has access to the internet if you want it, right? But you could just chat through the Ollama interface, and now you can ask a lot of those same questions. Hook it up to Open Web UI if you want, so we can Google things to help answer. But the privacy factor is just huge, and I think people really underestimate that. Especially, you don't know what these companies are doing with your data, and if they get breached, it's going everywhere.
Yeah, or take it away from you after you get used to it, as we've seen. So, Rain, we got another question for you over here on the SaaS side of things. Curious how much it could help with it, automating SemGrep, etc. What do you think?
I'm not super familiar on the subject, I'm not going to lie. But here's the thing. With just about every local model you have, if you build a small knowledge base, it's going to do pretty much anything you want it to do. The biggest thing is tool usage. And you can, I've had some success with custom making my own tools that models can use. The issue is getting them to call them, but you can fix that a lot with your system prompts, letting them know that like they have the option to call that, right? And then depending on the response, you extract that with Python, and then it calls the tool for it, essentially. But I think if you get the knowledge base good enough, and I'm talking like tool docs, I'm talking publications on it, right? And the usage, examples of usage. So if you have write-ups of like steps you've done yourself to actually get it to work, and tool commands are another big one. But I think if you get those things in there and you play with it a bit, I think you can get it to do just about anything you want.
Yeah. Awesome.
Do local models currently have the same sort of abstractions, I guess, as skills? And forgive me, but like, oh, hey, here's a markdown file of like, this is the operation, this is the procedure, this is the workflow. Do Ollama or Quen or any sort of equivalent things play nice with those? And that's my ignorance. I'm sorry, but
yes. So the thing with like skills files, and that's what you're talking about, right? The skills files, MD, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So ChatGPT and Claude, right? And I'll start with this. Is going to sound super long-winded. I'm sorry, but they're just wrappers, right, for OpenAI and Anthropic models. Okay, so when you look at stuff like OpenClaw and Hermes, those are essentially the same things. They're just wrappers around the models. But what they've done really well is they've figured out how to let those models use those things, if that makes sense. So there's a lot more in the back end, and I haven't gotten into wrappers quite yet, to be completely honest with you. But they are capable, yes. And a lot of these tools, especially Hermes, kind of do all this for you. So it's not even something you need to think about, especially Hermes. Hermes is super impressive.
Cool. Yeah, I guess it is sort of like the agent harness to a certain extent. But I think again with the engine, the framework, like literally what you build for this exact roll your own analyst case is just awesome. Finding the balance between that deterministic code and non-deterministic AI stuff. So cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is really good for anyone that wants to go and get set up with a local model and really becoming their own local analyst at home. This is a really good workshop for that. On that note, if someone wanted to use this as something like an educational tool, what are your thoughts on that? Because how much knowledge do they have to be able to have to work with this and spot some of those outliers or the hallucinations? Like, what would you recommend someone who's still kind of learning, still getting into things? What would be your advice on that?
It's a good question. I guess it depends on what we mean by learning necessarily, right? If it's a subject you're completely unaware of, it's going to be hard to spot hallucinations without fact checking literally everything it does, right? Yeah. But I think it would be good to learn alongside, right? One thing with local models, unless they're brand new release, but even then, right, is how up to date is that model trained? If you grab a local model and you ask it in chat on Olama, give me the news for today, a lot of them are going to tell you exactly when they were trained up to, right? It's usually not very recent. And I'm sure they have reasons for releasing them like that, but they are knowledge constrained unless they have access to the internet. But even then, you might not get the best results. So it's not going to be frontier model level.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense.
Yeah, it's so dependent on what the topic is too, I think, and how new it is, right? Because if it's a brand new tool that just came out, you're trying to learn, and it was trained up to 2024, it's just not going to know.
I think that's where this question is kind of leading on to a little bit what I was saying, right? Is how do you detect these general patterns? So like when you're responding, when you're typing in your question or your query, are there some big no-nos that you've noticed, like things that you should really avoid prompting the agent to really minimize hallucinations if you can?
I think one of the biggest things I've noticed working with AI is that you never want it to seem like you're forcing it to come up with something, right? And frontier models have even been bad about this in my experience. Like you ask it a question about something and you don't realize it when you're making the prompt, but the model feels like there should be something there for exactly what they're asking. So they come up with things or they make things seem like something and they really aren't, right? So a lot of times when you just tell it like, look, if this doesn't pertain to this or it's not in there, don't just make something up to have an answer. And you'll be surprised at how many times right after that, they don't send anything back. They're like, this doesn't apply to this article or whatever the case may be. So that's probably the biggest thing.
Don't make things up. Okay, gotcha.
Essentially, don't say it like that, right?
Yeah.
You want to frame it in a way like, here is my criteria for whatever I'm asking you to do. If it does not apply because of X, Y, and Z, then say that. Don't just make something up to appease me, essentially.
I like that.
Do you find yourself ever tripping over context windows to that point? Because I feel like, in personal opinion, it's like, okay, can I give as much insight, give as much data, give as much context, just as you mentioned, hey, here's an example of what's good, here's an example of what's bad, this is exactly one by one what I want you to do, and make the engine. Do you trip over, okay, context windows now getting ever bloated, or has that kind of been smoothly solved at this point?
So context windows are, and I hit on this in a bit of the course content, right? Olama is a great example. So if your system hardware isn't great, it's going to cap your context window out by default. You can always change it, right? But it does set a cap, and it's pretty low, right? So you do need to calculate, and there's easy calculations for this, and I think I put it in the content, how you can calculate the token usage, essentially, for the context. English characters, I think it's like 2 per English character, and then 3 per like symbol, essentially, right? But it is a problem. So if you have really low hardware and then you throw in like a 4B model, Olama might cap you at like a default window of 4,000 for the context window, which is not a lot of characters, right? And that includes the output as well as the input. So a lot of people don't have this issue with frontier models because now they have compaction and everything like that and whatnot. And their context window is absolutely enormous, right? In comparison to local models. So that is something you have to take into account. But this is also where using a multi-model pipeline can run. But here's the other thing, is that this costs you nothing to run locally except time, right? So if you need to break it up into different prompts, you absolutely can't do that. maybe do a first pass that's strictly for scoring. So all you give it is a scoring rubric and the article content, right? It scores it, and you have a filter gate. Because maybe I don't want analysis on stuff that scores under whatever my threshold is, right? So let's say I don't want to see articles that score below a 40 based on my rubric. Why would I even waste the time analyzing those things? So split it into 2 calls. And that solves the context window problem a lot. And I see someone asking about the multi-model in the chat right now. There's a lot of options. What I would say for projects like this, you don't need to use an extra tool to like manage the different model calls. You can just hard code them in and do it like phases, right? So as I was just saying, do like phase 1 is pre-filtering, right? And that would be the call is generating a score, and then you're filtering on that. So anything that scores below a 40 doesn't get sent to phase 2, which phase 2 is where you're doing a call to actually do the analysis. And maybe, you know, phase 3.5 is where you do the embedding, so you can do clustering of stories into single groups. And then phase 4 is detection idea generation. And then maybe phase 4.5 is where you're doing a call to a model to generate a sigma rule based off those detection ideas. And you can escalate the size of those models each time. That way you're getting better output where it actually matters. You don't want to use a 27B model to score something. That's wasteful.
That's really good insight over there. Yeah, especially with the weights and the size of the models. Do you cover a lot of that as well too in the workshop? Like, do you specify which models you'd recommend for certain types of tasks? Sort of like, yeah.
That's a whole nother beast. I did recommend 2 specifically for this project.
Yeah.
So Quinn and Gemma were the 2 I recommended for this one specifically. Gemma 4, the one I called out, would be better if you had like 16 gigabytes of RAM. 8 gigabytes, you probably want to use the Quinn 4B model. They're perfectly suited for this task. But if you do get in, as I've been saying, to the detection generation stuff, you do want to consider bigger models. And what I'll say on that specifically, right, is you want the model that fits the job. So when you go look these models up, get them from Olam if you can. Stay away from Hugging Face unless you absolutely need it, to be clear. It's not that it's a bad place, but you're going to find some weird stuff on there. But certain models are suited for specific tasks. And this is when we start talking about instruction versus reasoning models. Right. And we start talking about models that are specialized in coding versus like multimodal. Right. So when you're generating a detection, right, you're talking like SPL, KQL, Sigma, very syntax heavy things that are code essentially. So you want to use a coding model for that more than likely. And I've had the best luck. I played with Kimmy some. So Kimmy has the K2.7 coder now. I think it just came out a couple of days ago. I tried it and it was actually doing some pretty good one-shots on SPL queries, so with very little oversight. And then if you tune that a little bit in the system prompt and give it a style guide, it's pretty good.
That's what I like to hear, man. I mean, I can't keep asking you to like, hey, Tallis, I'm so used to calling him Tallis, but I want to say like, just keep adding content to the workshop because I wish you could in some way and just make like a small course on this or maybe just kind of teach more about it. Imagine you want to have like a fleet, right? Like, maybe you wanted like a SOC tier 1 analyst, a tier 2, tier 3, and a security engineer. You probably want different models then, right? Like that's what you're saying, like different models for different purposes. I'd love to hear your take on that. Maybe at another time, if you want to write that up, I think that'd be really cool to add on and share your knowledge, whether that's in the workshop or just on the socials or however you want to do it. I think that'd be really valuable. Just for myself, I would like to know that, like kind of building a little fleet of my own local people doing things. That'd be super cool.
Absolutely. I haven't considered that, but it's definitely something I'm interested in looking into. So I probably will. Now you bring it up.
Nice. Yeah, see, right?
It's so funny. I want to keep asking, like, oh, is there a good resource that helps cover this? And I'm like, wait a second, that's the workshop. That's what you made. That's already it. This is fantastic. I think, hey, this one alone, amongst all the other incredible workshops, is absolutely a standout, exceptional part of ContinuumCon. So seriously, genuinely, thank you. And I hope you keep chipping away at this. I hope you keep adding some more great education and content for it. Just as Anthony was saying, this is definitely a road to run down, dude.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's endless. There's so many opportunities there with local AI.
Awesome. Well, any last things you want to add on over here, Ray? And you want a little plug, anything you want to drop? Any other, I don't see any other questions coming in, but any last things you want to share with us?
We are making courses on detection engineering and everything with level effect. So those will be coming out this year, including one on game integrity, so game security type topics. that's not getting done. So that's going to be super fun. And we got
Video
some
game security.
very good ideas for the labs that I think everyone would enjoy, whether they're into games or not. So, yeah,
Awesome.
If you're interested in local model stuff, feel free to hit me up. I think you can just message me on LinkedIn, find me on a Discord. Doesn't really matter. And I probably will post some blogs more on local model stuff since Anthony has given me the idea now. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to read it. Let me know when you get that out there, man.
absolutely.
I see chat is already chomping at the bit for it too. We all want it.
Yeah,
dude.
they
Keep
want it.
coming.
Yeah. I've got a little so I use Pent AGI. I'm not sure if you've ever messed around with that, but I've used that for like my own little pen test side stuff, and it's really good, but it has its limitations as well too. That's why it sounds like you played around with this a lot more, and that's why I really want to hear more about that, because I want to go mess around with this even more. So thank you very much for coming on, man. Thanks for making it as well too, because I know you just had pre-recorded originally, but I know you made the time, so thank you for coming on and sharing everything as well.
Yeah, give me some grace on the video, everybody. This is the first time I ever.
No, you did great.
Man,
Fantastic.
it was a mission briefing. Like after that, I was like, I need to build this. I wanted to do this content. It was really good. So
I didn't think anyone wanted to watch a video for 40 minutes watching me talk about code. So I can't imagine me wanting to do that.
No, man,
You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
I probably would.
Thank you,
Cool.
thank you again and again, Rain. If you're all right with it, I think we'll take you off. But you made seriously a phenomenal dent and a great ContinuumCon workshop. We can't say thanks enough. So
Yep. And thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
take care, brother.
We'll see you around.